So, my name is Amina. I started this channel a couple of years ago now, with the intention of posting some things that I thought might be interesting about Muslim women who do lots of different things. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that because the pandemic happened and I never really got it off the ground. But I did have the channel already made, and over the last year, I've been reading a lot of books and I love talking about the books that I've been reading. I also enjoy listening to people talk about books that they've been reading, and I found that I've been watching a lot of booktube channels, so I thought I would start talking about some of the books that I'm interested in, and that I've been reading over the last couple of years. I do read quite a relatively wide range, but there are genres that I probably don't read as much of. In particular, kind of fantasy and romance just don't interest me as much. I don't like books that are heavily political either, and I'm not talking about real world politics, but more kind of fake political intrigue books. I just don't find them as interesting. But so those are the main things introductory wise. I don't really know what else to say. So I thought for this very first video, my aim is to keep the videos kind of nice and short. So I thought for this very first video, I'll just talk about some of the books that I'm currently reading. So the first book that we have is one called Children of Dune. So this is the third book in the Dune series. I picked up the first one about a year ago. I saw that there was a movie coming out for it, so I was quite intrigued and picked it up, and I really enjoyed the first book actually. It has one of my favourite tropes in books where something that happens at the end of the book is told, well, not at the end, but in the middle of the book is told at the beginning, and so you spend the first half of the book just finding out how that happened, and I really enjoy that in books. There was really a lot of really good world building, and I found the story quite interesting. I don't enjoy the rest. Well, the second I haven't enjoyed this. I didn't enjoy the second one as much, and so far the third one is also it's okay. And I think part of the reason for me not enjoying the second and the third one quite so much is because I think the first one had so much world building, and although there was a lot of political intrigue, which doesn't really get me interested in books. There was so much else going on that I was able to stay really engaged. However, the second and the third one, because we were already quite comfortable with the world that the books are set in, we don't get as much of the world building, and its focus is so much more on the political stuff that's going on that I just don't find it as interesting. But they are good, and if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in, then you might want to go for that. The second book that I'm currently reading is The Secret History, and I'm about just over 2/3 of the way through this, and I'm absolutely loving this book. I believe it was released in 1992, and it's quite a well-known, popular book. And so I picked it up about a year ago. I didn't really start reading it until a couple of weeks ago, and since then I have just been completely absorbed. I think it's one of the best books that I've read in the last 2 or 3 years. Once I start reading, I don't want to put it down. Again, it does that same thing where you find out something that's going to happen later in the book right at the beginning, and you're just taken along on this journey, getting to know all the characters. In terms of what the book is about, it follows a man who has just started at a college in America, and I believe he's studying Greek, and he gets in with this kind of fairly cliquey crowd, and you just watch his relationships with them build and evolve over the course of his first year there, and some interesting things happen. But I think it's one of the most I'm absolutely loving reading this. The third book that I am currently reading is a book called Digital Minimalism. I don't know if you can actually see any of these things that I'm holding up. And so I usually try and read at least one non-fiction. I was kind of make sure I've got one non-fiction book on the go. Usually just fairly random picks. I don't enjoy not reading non-fiction, to be honest. but I do know that I learn from them. So it tends to take me a little while to get through my non-fiction books, and if I had a couple more than one on the go, I'd probably kind of enter a bit of a reading slump where I didn't want to pick up any books. So this one, Digital Minimalism, is actually pretty good. It's a fairly easy read. It's not hard to get through, and I've gone through it quite quickly. It's given some good tips, nothing that's completely mind-blowing, and it's all about letting go of some of the technologies, and not the technology themselves, but in terms of like the apps that we use and the things that we've come to rely on that we don't necessarily need, and things that take up a lot of our time that we could spend on other things that we wanted to do, but because we are reading, because we are spending so much time on those apps, we're not able to do some of the other things we do. So not only does he talk about how to reduce our use of, social media and things, and have a more intentional approach towards using them, he also gives you things that he also gives suggestions on things that you can do to fill up that time better. So the fourth book that I'm reading is, well, I haven't actually started this book yet. I have just finished the first book in the series of The City of Ember. So this is actually a book for ages 8 to 12. I read the first one when I was a child and never got around to reading the rest of the series. So I decided to pick them up recently. So yesterday I finished the very first book. Obviously it's a children's book, so it's not the most complicated thing to read, but it is pretty good, and I recommend it to any 8 or 12-year-olds out there. I do plan on finishing the rest of the series just to know what happened, because the 12-year-old inside me is very curious to see how the series finished. And then the final book that I have, so this is actually a book, it's not a book that I would have picked myself. It was sent to me in a book exchange that I participated in maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, and I just haven't picked it up. But I've been making a bit of an effort to get through some of my older books that have just been sitting on my shelf for some time, and that is Memoirs of a Geisha. So I did, I have seen the movie. I think I've watched the movie. I watched it a long time ago, but I don't remember anything about it. I've only read the first 2 chapters now. The writing's quite interesting. I can definitely tell it probably has some themes that I don't necessarily have a big amount of interest in, but we'll see what happens. I might end up really enjoying it. The writing seems quite good at the moment. So yeah, those are all the books that I am reading at the moment. I do have a few videos planned. My intention is to keep these kind of fairly short and sweet. I don't want anything that goes on for kind of more than 10 minutes. So I think the next video that I will do is probably one, just a quick run through the books I read in 2020, because I think 2020 I really ramped up my reading. I used to read a lot when I was at school, and I was the kind of person that would go to the school library, take a book out, read it overnight, bring it back the next day, take another book out, read it overnight, take it back the next day. And then, I don't know, obviously went to university, and over the last 6 years while I was at university, and over life gets busy. When you do have time to read, you're like, I should really be reading some school books. So I haven't read as much as I should have. So I was probably reading about 1 to 4 books a year, like for pleasure rather than academic books. So since I graduated and I started working, and with the pandemic giving me all my free time, I have been ramping up the amount of books I read. So last year I read about 50 books. Some of them were audiobooks. I currently don't have any audiobooks on the go, mainly because I'm currently listening to a podcast series. So the time that I would be listening to an audiobook, I'm currently spending listening to that podcast series. So yeah, I think the next book, which I'll probably film right now, is going to be the 50 books that I read in 2020. And I may or may not go in depth on some of the books, but we'll see. Thank you for watching.